All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Lasting Learning Podcast. As always, I am so glad that you chose to tune in. This week, you have an amazing guest on your hands. You're going to hear from a guy he's doing all the things. When I say all the things, put those in caps, put them in bold, italics, put the period after every word. You know, I'm a busy guy, but this guy is literally doing all the things. He's doing all of the things extremely well on top of all of that. He is living life out in Wyoming in God's country. He is an educator of the year. He is into theatrics and producing. He's a speaker. He's a writer. He is an educator. He is just literally doing all the things. And for those of you that are watching this on YouTube, you see he's got a little look about him too. Yep, his name is actually Phony Stark. I'll let you do that that translation later on. But today I've got the one, the only Bradlee Skinner here on the podcast with us. Bradlee, thank you so much for finding time in your busy life to join us.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and thank you for that very generous intro. I appreciate it, and I do keep busy, and I'm sure in this we'll talk a little bit more about that, but also we'll talk about why.
Yeah, well, let's just
thanks
do
so
that
much
right
for having
now,
me.
Let's do that right now. You are a busy guy, so let's tell people who you are. What are you about, and what's your journey been like?
Okay. Well, we're just going to jump right into it.
Let's do it, man. No, we don't do the softballs. Let's just go.
All right. So yeah, my name is Bradlee W. Skinner. I am an educator. I am an author. I actually have 2 books in the work. One, an education book that is titled "Yelling at Flowers." The concept of that is really it's about keeping great educators in the education field and how schools, communities, and leaders especially can keep those great educators from leaving education. Right. Because there's so many reasons of why that we might leave. But if we think about it, of why educators leave the career field, why they leave that practice that they're so committed and dedicated to and so passionate about, it's no different than yelling at flowers and expecting them to bloom. So we've got to be able to keep good educators where they are because our students need them. They really need it, especially today. And then I also have a children's book that's going to be coming out later. It's called "There's a Haitian in My Education." And it is a collection of quotes from a good friend of mine who is from Haiti. And using French and Creole, he actually teaches a lot of great lessons that apply directly to education today in teaching the value that those who are different from us make our schools better. And it's not a weakness to recognize that value of people who are different, who may look different from us, who may talk different from us, really helps build who we are and makes us better people by having them in our lives.
I love that. There's so much to unpack from both of those titles. And I'm going to put a pause in it real quick because I know that if I put a pause in it right now, listeners are going to say, oh, no, come on, Dave. Have them unpack those texts a little more. We will. But first, I'm curious about you. Bradlee W. Skinner. You throw the W in there with emphasis. Why the W?
Well, it's for 2 reasons. One, there's more the business reason, and then there's the humorous personal reason. So business-wise, I found there's a lot of Bradlee Skinners out there in the world. I spell my name a little bit differently. It's Bradlee with 2 E's, so Bradlee, because my father's name is Lee, and my mother's middle name was Lee. And so they wanted to keep that spelling. And my middle name is actually Wayne. So using Wayne because my grandfather, who went to school at USC, is a huge John Wayne fan and loved all of John Wayne's movies. So I grew up being a big John Wayne fan. And then actually when I went to college, ended up joining the same fraternity as John Wayne. I'm a Sigma Chi, and so it was just kind of neat to have that connection. However, I don't use Wayne, I just use the W. So part of the humorous aspect is because Wayne is actually the most prominent middle name of serial killers in America, so didn't want to go with that. And there is also another Bradlee Skinner who has just the different spelling than mine, but also has the same birth date.
Oh, wow.
And anytime I get pulled over for a broken headlight or something, the cops always get worried because they think I'm that guy who apparently had a lot of past warrants out for him in Iowa. But I've never lived in Iowa, so I'm okay.
So I'm thinking right now, we're going to unpack a lot of dirt on you right now. The fact that you're making connections to serial killers and every time you get pulled over, as though it's multiple times, I think we're going to find out something here, and I'm curious.
I've done my own research, so I'm making sure that that's
okay.
really why I use Bradlee W. Skinner. Is it's the sound of it. It connects it to me, so people know that it's me that they're talking about. Hopefully,
that's awesome. And then you got this nickname that I know that you use all the time, the Phony Stark. Can you unpack that a little bit for the people that are listening and might not be able to see what I can see?
Yes, since I was a junior in high school. I've been told I look like Robert Downey Jr., so I've got it for a long time. Back then, it wasn't quite the comment, the compliment that is today. So I've just always got that connection.
Back then, it was you look like a drug addict, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And I love his body of work. I think it's a great story of him turning his life around.
Absolutely.
Which does parallel mine in quite a few ways. But I actually had the Baldo, the disconnected anchor kind of style goatee about a year and a half before he started filming Iron Man. So once Iron Man came out, I was like, great, there's no way I'm living this down anymore. And so for the next 10 years, I kept getting, hey, you look like Tony Stark. First day of school, my students would always say, especially incoming freshmen who hadn't met me before. And then I had one student who, I think trying to sit in the back of the class and be that jokester, another student asked, hey, have you ever been told you look like Tony Stark? And smugly, this kid in the back yells, more like Phony Stark. And I was like, dude, that's genius. Can I borrow that? And he looked a little shocked at first, like, wait, that was supposed to be an insult. Why are you taking that as a compliment? And I said, because, dude, that was creative. I'd like to use it. And I ran a DJ business, a little side hustle of mine. I have an entertainment company. And so after that, when I started DJing, I would now perform under the stage name as DJ Phony Stark.
Oh, that's amazing.
And it's just caught on, and it's been kind of my nom de plume, if you will. So.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I know your background here a little bit. You said you had this side hustle, you done some production. You ever been into acting? And if so, can you talk to us about that journey a little bit?
So stage acting has always been, it was my major in college. I've done a lot of acting and directing, done some small commercial work, nothing big that anybody would see me in. And I think part of that detriment is that they don't want a guy that looks like Tony Stark when they already have a Tony Stark. But it's, my passion was always teaching kids. It was always helping students find success on the stage or even in film. Even though it wasn't necessarily the route that I wanted to go anymore. The biggest aspect of that was because even though I loved acting and I loved performing, it was when I finally found something that I loved even more, which was when I met my wife. And I wanted to have the life that I wanted with her, and knowing that continuing acting and traveling and being away from her wasn't no longer what I wanted. And so that's when I moved into education, was it would allow me to still keep doing theater, to teach others, but still have the relationship with her that I wanted. And it's been really the best decision I've ever made. And it's been wonderful.
Dude, she coached you up right. That was an amazing answer. So make sure she's listening to this. Play this back on a loop. The next time you get in an argument, say, no, let's go back and listen to that episode real quick. And listen, honey, look at all that I gave up for you. Did you see it as giving things up for her, or do you feel like you've gained as a result of this?
I married up in every aspect possible. Ever since Melissa came into my life, I have been a better version of myself. I'm a better person. I'm a better educator. I'm just, everything about my life is better because I have somebody who's so committed and so dedicated and who loves me, not just for being me, but she loves me even though I have flaws in my life. She loves me in a way that I didn't know was possible. And that commitment has opened doors. It's allowed me to see what I'm capable of in a way that I never knew that I could ever achieve. And so definitely never look like I've given up anything. I've gained everything because of her.
That's amazing. Do you see yourself as growing, evolving, improving professionally as well over the course of the last couple of decades of your professional life? Like how has your professional life evolved you as a person?
Oh, a great deal. And I don't think it's so much of that it's my professional career. It's been the people that I've been surrounded by.
Okay.
That's done far more. And I say that because I haven't always had the greatest leaders to help teach me. I think I had good educators. I had good teachers and good professors. And so when I was learning to be a teacher, I was learning how to do this career that I wanted to be a part of. But then once I became a teacher, I didn't always have that teaching anymore. I was still considered a rookie. I was young. I was inexperienced. I thought I knew a lot, but when I first went into the teaching field, it was amazing how quickly I realized I knew very little. And it's not that I think colleges didn't prepare me well. I think it's just life changes so quickly that it's impossible to keep up. And to put that in perspective, let me explain that. And some people may not understand what I mean by this. But I came out of college having all this background, all this content information. I was so prepared to teach. I graduated, top of my class when it came to the education classes I was in. I was incredibly sought after for student teaching. And then I had numerous job offers immediately after college. And when I picked the school that I wanted to go into, it was the right environment. I felt it was the good place for me to be. And as soon as I got hired, 2 weeks later, that principal retired and a new principal came in. Someone I had no experience with, knew nothing about. So I'm starting totally from scratch, new school, new building, new principal. And in my first full week of school, my first full actual week of having students sitting in front of them, teaching them, was September 11th, 2001. So here I am having absolutely no clue what I was supposed to do. What college class prepared me for that moment? What teaching did I have that prepared me to how to explain to kids what they were seeing on a TV screen, on the news in front of them? How was I supposed to do any of that? I felt so completely alone in that moment. Yeah. I felt so unprepared. I felt that I should not be a teacher because I had no clue what to do. And it wasn't until I had one educator, a science teacher across the hall, just peeked his head in and said, "Hey man, are you okay?" That's all it took. And then I realized, you know what? I'm not, but I'm okay admitting that and letting my students know that it's okay.
Yeah.
My students didn't have to know that I had all the answers. They could see that it was okay that I was vulnerable. They could see that I was confused, that I was scared, that I was conflicted. And it was okay. And I allowed them to feel whatever they needed to feel in that moment. And it was okay.
I remember that day very well. I was in a very similar situation. I had a year under my belt. So I thought I had all the answers. I came in with all the swagger in the world because I survived my first year. And then boom, that wake-up call, that reality check of how humbling and how small I really was as a person. And the enormity of my impact and the way that I composed myself in front of my students was going to impact how they responded to the events as well. And I know there are educators listening right now that might not have been teaching at that time, but are making those connections to what's happening in their world right now, whether it's through politics or pandemics or movements and initiatives or whatever the case may be. There are educators out there right now who are feeling so ill prepared for the world we're in right now. What is your advice to those people? Is it similar to what you were able to experience? Just admit what you don't know and lean into other people, or is there something bigger?
I think that's part of it. I think that so often teachers feel that they have to be that expert at everything. They have to be that sage on the stage that's going to divine wisdom to everyone they come in contact with. And I think it's okay to admit when we don't know something, it's okay to not know it. It's okay to be uninformed as long as we're willing to learn. I didn't tell my kids, hey, I'm going to totally BS it here and just pretend like I know what's going on, which I didn't. I wanted them to say, look, I don't know how to handle this situation right now, but I'm going to do everything I can to figure it out and to figure out what I need to do as a person and as your teacher to make it okay and to make it better. But I'm certainly not going to be that one that tells you to sit back in your seat, to be quiet, to open up your book. Say, look, you're going to experience feelings that you've never had before, and that's okay. And I think letting people know that, sometimes we don't have all the answers, and sometimes we are just going to have to figure it out together.
That's good. That's really good. You hinted at the fact that this is something that you've had to figure out, maybe in spite of leadership, maybe not always having people in front of you to cast that vision and to give you that guidance. How have you discovered this for yourself, and what impact did that make on your journey in becoming a leader?
That's one of the difficult things. And when I tell this part, I really want it to be that our listeners understand this is part of my story and not a criticism towards any individual leaders. I think I've had great school leaders, but they may not have been great for me. I think we conflicted. We had issues. We had things that didn't mesh in the school. So
Great
it's not
distinction.
not a criticism of them. It's just that we didn't work well.
Sure.
So I taught for 3 years in my first school, didn't mesh well with the principal, and he didn't renew my contract. Okay? So I started to question, what is teaching really right for me? Took a year off, said, nope, I really need to be in education. This is what I need to do. Reached out, kept applying for additional schools, got a new job, moved to another area of the state, and started teaching again. Had great success, incredible teaching, but again, a school leader, transitioned from one principal to another, and the new guy and I didn't agree on a lot of philosophies of education. And it eventually led to, I never want to use the term burnout, because I don't think it was anything I did of my own self. I think it was demoralization. I became demoralized as I believed that what I was doing was no longer having value to what the students were needing in their lives. And it became a point where I think if you hear something long enough, you start to believe it. And hearing community members and school leaders question if I should ever be a teacher really got me to a point where I started to believe that maybe they were right. And in the middle of a school year, in dealing with severe depression, dealing with health issues, dealing with a lot of problems of my own due to the constant criticism and dysfunction that I was living in somewhat of a toxic environment, I eventually ended up resigning 2 weeks before Christmas. Wow. Because I physically and mentally just couldn't handle it anymore. Wow. And my world got completely turned upside down. I went from being what I thought was a valued educator to being a homeless pizza delivery driver. We lost our house. We didn't have a place to live. I was only able to get work because I had a former student who reached out and offered me a job to come and work with him at the pizza place he was managing.
Wow.
And that was pretty humbling of an experience.
I can imagine. I mean, again, I'm trying to make some connections for the listeners that might not be able to relate to something that severe, but it's profound to me, the decision that you made based off of opinions or perceptions of others, the people that walk around in the suits that oftentimes get paid to observe, evaluate, provide feedback, judge, if you will. Because there are people all over the place. You can find them on social media. You can find them in the Twitterverse that say, no, just focus on the kids. Don't worry about everybody else's perceptions of you. It's all about the kids. Were you not able to just turn and look at the kids and see their smiling faces every day and tune out all the rest of the noise?
No. Unfortunately, no. Because that's all I wanted to do was teach kids. But then there becomes a point where it's the interruptions and it's the criticism and the critiques where it became to such a dramatic point that I could no longer just focus on the kids. Because what happens when your own children, my own kids who were in schools in that area, were hearing things that people were saying about their father, that were hearing the critiques and things that were flat out bold-faced lies about me that were being spoken in hushed tones over a dinner table or in line at a grocery store. That began to impact me in such a way that it was tough for me to even function as a person, let alone a teacher. And it was tough. It was really tough.
And I know I'm asking you to go back and try to remember how you felt in the moment, which might be difficult, or maybe it's not if it's that raw still. Did you feel, were you beginning to believe their perceptions about you as an educator? Or did you choose to leave because you just needed to remove yourself from that environment because you still knew who you were, but you just had to get away from them?
I think I lost part of who I was because
Mm.
I started to believe the things that I started to question that maybe they were right. Maybe
Wow.
I shouldn't be a teacher. And I thought that simply removing myself from that environment would work. But what happened was when I resigned is I had identified myself in the last, 12 years of being an educator, that's all I knew who I was.
Yeah.
And without being a teacher, without going to school in the morning, without educating kids, I lost that sense of who I was. And that put me into even a deeper spiral because now not only had I lost what I felt was self-worth, I lost my self-identification and I didn't know who I was anymore. And that was even more devastating because I didn't know where to go. I
Wow.
didn't know what I was supposed to do from there. And again, I speak on mental health because I was at such a dark point that I didn't want to talk to anybody about anything, and I didn't realize just how self-damaging my own behavior was because the last thing I wanted to do was talk to anyone about it because it was admitting that I was not whole.
Yeah.
It was admitting that something within me was not working right, that I felt like if I say that, I'm admitting that I'm broken.
Hmm.
And and I didn't realize just how important it was to reach out, to talk, to share what was happening in my mind with
Right.
somebody else who could get me to a point where I wasn't going to do something that was going to be even more long lasting and devastating to me or my family.
And I appreciate you sharing this. I mean, I have been there, and listeners to this podcast for a while have heard me share that story. So I don't want to go there right now because this is your story, and I want to focus in on that. But I'm also going to challenge our listeners. If you are an educator, if you're a teacher, I'm gonna give you just a small nugget. I'm gonna go educational geek for a second. But if you don't think that the labels that you put on a kid matter, listen to this story. If you don't think that your judgments, your perceptions, the way that you view a kid changes their identity and what they think about themselves, listen to the story. If you are a leader in any capacity and you are slapping labels on teachers willy-nilly, or you think that the labels that teachers get, even if it's the evaluation labels of effective and highly effective, if you don't think those matter, listen to this story. Labels matter, and very rarely do they enhance a person's life. I'm just curious right now, how in the world did you overcome this? Because if you go back and you listen to the introduction that I gave you, I mean, that is your legitimate biography. It describes who you are as an educator today. You're writing books, you speak, you got swagger about you. You know that you are an amazing educator. But a decade ago, you were literally out delivering pizzas because you thought, this isn't for me. I have nothing. How in the world did you overcome that?
As I mentioned before, a lot of that obviously is because of my wife. I I really fear and worry, but I also admit it because I recognize that it's true. That were it not for her love and support, I probably wouldn't be here today.
Mm.
She's the one that encouraged me to get help. She's the one who always encouraged me to talk to somebody, to talk to a professional. And she never was dragging me out in front. She was never pushing me from behind. She was always by my side, walking right there with me every step of the way. And and so knowing that she had that love and support for me, eventually she really was telling me, if you look at everything that you're doing since you left teaching, you're still teaching. When I was working at the pizza shop, I was asked to train the new employees. I was still teaching. I even would be asked by neighboring school districts to come and be a substitute teacher because they saw the value that I had as an educator. So I was still teaching. I found others who, would ask me, even if it was in, just small organizations like the Boy Scouts or church groups, they asked me to still teach. So I was still offering that knowledge that I had, that wisdom and the effectiveness, even though I just saw it as, well, I'm just doing someone a favor.
Mm.
And eventually it was that realization came back that I really believe teaching is where I need to be. I just need to be in a different place. And so that's part of what I talk about in that concept in my book, Yelling at Flowers, is that sometimes you can give the right amount of sunlight, the perfect amount of nutrients and water, and everything is you're doing exactly by the book, and that flower still doesn't bloom. And when that happens, sometimes it's you've got to change the environment in which that flower is planted in. And by changing the very soil that it's in can allow it to grow. And I needed to get out of that soil that I was in. I needed to be completely replanted somewhere that would value me for what I had to offer, that saw me not just as a teacher that's a temporary fix, but they saw me for somebody that had true value as an educator and as a person. And so on a whim, I ended up applying for a job in Rock Springs, Wyoming, with a principal named Darren Peppard, who I still get emotional just talking about it, because Darren has become one of my best friends in this world. Previous to that, I didn't even know that you could really like your principal, let alone be friends with them. And Darren became one of my best friends, and we talk weekly because he's always sharing something to help me improve and to be a better version of myself. And he took a gamble. He took that risk. He rolled that dice, whatever metaphor you want, that he saw a person who was no longer teaching, that had this gap in their education career and was trying to come back to teaching. And he was willing to say, you know what, I think this is the right guy. Does he necessarily fit? Is he really the best candidate? Or is he the right candidate? And Darren hired me based on the fact that he believed that I was the right person for their school and for those students' needs. And that as soon as I set foot in that school, as soon as I shook hands with Darren on that first day I met him, I knew there was something different. There was something different about his leadership style, about the way that he ran that school, about the way that he made lasting relationships and connections with teachers and students. And I wanted to be a part of it.
That's so good, man. So good. And yeah, I'm thinking about your metaphor that you use describing the flower and how sometimes it just needs to be planted in a new place. It sounds to me like early on in your career, you've been placed in pots that were too small, that you were restricted and your roots couldn't grow. And now all of a sudden you're working with Darren, and it's almost like you're in peat moss or something, where you're able to just go wherever you need to go. And you've got this amazing person there that's just sprinkling the right amount of nutrients at all times. You know, he placed you on this road to awesome, to use his term, you know. And you look back on the last decade of your life, you know, the last 2 decades of your life, you've identified 2 of these pivotal people that changed the course of your personal trajectory, your wife and Darren, which I think is probably the reason why you are this amazing educator today, because you're always looking at other people and taking the spotlight off of you and saying, well, it's because of somebody else. Where you are right now in your career, 10 years ago, would you have ever thought this was possible? Did you know that this was inside of you? When I say where you are now, this person that's out there speaking and sharing and preaching this message to other educators, did you know that you had that much to give?
Yes and no. And I say that, one, I'm still very humble for the opportunities that I've been given. I knew there was something. That's all I could really say, is I knew there was something more. I knew I had more to offer, and I knew that I could be a better version of myself. I just didn't know how to get there. I didn't know what that would look like. So did I think that this other stuff was possible? Absolutely not. My goal was to simply just do my job, be an educator. So when I came back to teaching, even though I had this great leader that Darren Peppard was and is, I didn't realize just how much I was still suffering. Even though I was able to get a handle on my depression, I was able to understand what I needed to do from the help of others in working and living with that. What I didn't realize was the post-traumatic stress syndrome from being homeless, from being unemployed, from being in that situation, that actually added a ton of mental health issues that I didn't realize that I was still carrying. And so when I got back into teaching again, my whole approach was keep your head down, don't rock the boat, don't make any waves, just do your job and don't screw anything up. So I had a very slow start to my school year because I didn't want to come out racing and look like I was trying to do more. Even though inside that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to give my students so much more. I wanted to make the most exciting classroom possible, but I didn't want to be noticed. I didn't want my school leaders to know my name. I didn't want them to see me. I didn't want them to question what I was doing. And maybe if I could just teach and be quiet and they'd leave me alone, I would be okay. And it was one day that, again, back to my wife, where she saw what I was doing and she says, this isn't you. This is not the person that I married. This is not the teacher that I love watching them work. This is not the person that your students need. They don't need quiet Mr. Skinner. They need Bradlee W. Skinner, who's that guy that's out there and doing these things. And she was right. And Darren was right. And he even told me that it's like, you need to start doing more, man. You're lagging behind.
Oh.
And he noticed it, and which is exactly the opposite of what I wanted. I didn't want him to notice me at all. But he noticed that I wasn't being true to my potential. And my students, I believe, noticed it too, and it needed to change. And he challenged me to change and to do more and to do better. And once I knew that I had his vote of confidence, and he wanted and expected me to do these things, I started implementing new things in my classroom and started doing wild, crazy things that I had done before and had been criticized for. I had these new ideas that I believed would work, but immediately got shut down previously in my career, and now Darren was fostering it, saying, go for it. If it works, great. If it doesn't, stop it. It's that simple. And so I did. And things really, really started to change. I started to feel like myself again. I started to believe in myself again. And it felt great.
Do you think there's any part of you that has that I'll show you attitude? And I'm asking personally, because I wanted to see if I'm alone in this, where I've had times in my career too where leaders or other educators have looked at me and said, you're not a fit. Your thoughts are too radical. You're too progressive. You don't fit within the mold. You don't fit within our little box. And if I'm being completely honest, in the last 5 or 6 years, I know I've made decisions. I know I've done some things, overextended myself at times, simply so that I could look back at those other people that thought those things about me and say, look where look how far I've gone, and look at what I've accomplished. Look what I'm doing now. And I know that's vain. I know that's arrogant. I know it's prideful. I know it's selfish. I know it's for all the wrong reasons. I know that. And trust me, I've got people in my life now that are very critical and are great accountability partners to try to keep the humility in place and make sure the motivations are pure. Mm-hmm. However, I'm wondering, is there any part of you that wants those other people to notice who you are today?
You know, there was a time where I think it was a few years back, like after I had come back to teaching and started seeing success again, there was that moment. There was that part where I wanted to almost do the, rub it in your face or haha, I told you so. But then I realized that's part of their story. That's not my story. My story is about me and my family and those wonderful people around me that did support me, that did believe in me and helped me achieve more. For those other people, for the doubters, the haters, the naysayers, I don't know their full story. I don't know what led them to doubt me, what led them to criticize me. I don't know what happened in their lives that brought them to a point where they felt that they needed to be so critical and negative of me. So when I realized that's part of their story and they can deal with it the way that they choose, I can only choose how I react and how I deal with it. And once I was able to understand that it wasn't necessary for me to rub it in their faces or to, send them, newspaper clippings or headlines of stuff that I've done, I felt a lot more at ease, and I felt better about knowing who I was and that I'm okay with where I'm at.
I think just hearing your story right now, there are a lot of people listening that are saying, wow, I've got to read the full version of the story. And I know your book, Yelling at Flowers, it's not autobiographical. It's not the the Bradlee W. Skinner story, but there are elements of your journey weaved within this text where
Hmm.
people are will
Absolutely.
be able to pick up on the connections just from listening to this.
Hmm.
But they're also gonna be able to take some truths and apply it. It's not just bashing what you've been through. It's also illuminating who you've become and how other
Yes.
people can be those leaders or those supports or just that person that wraps their arm around somebody and does life and does education and does teaching with somebody else. So I'm super excited for people to get this, because right now there are a lot of people feeling that burnout, feeling like that one more thing is going to be
Hmm.
the thing that drives them out.
Yeah.
If you were to take all of that and summarize it and say, teachers, here's the thing I want you to take away from this. And typically I call it the mic drop moment, but for you, I'm going to phrase it a little bit differently. But what is the thing that educators need or people need right now, not just to survive, not just to hold on, but to keep going and get to that next level? What is that, the secret sauce or the magic pill, if there is one?
For me, and again, hopefully this does apply for some people, but for me in my circumstance, in my life at that moment, it was realizing just how incredible and amazing that life can be when you start surrounding yourself with people who are dedicated and committed to seeing you succeed, and you rid yourself of those who are hoping to see you fail. That's what made the difference. I had to change that environment. I had to uproot and get into a new soil of people who were positive, of those who loved and wanted to see people succeed. Not just hoping for success for themselves, but everyone around them. They want them to be better. They want you to be better. They want their whole circle to be a better circle of people, of educators, of students, of friends, of neighbors, of community. That's what I needed. And you're always going to have some people that are you're always going to have those haters. You're going to have those doubters, but they don't need to be in your circle. They can keep their own circle. They can be where they want to be. And it just took me time to realize that I don't need to spend all that effort and energy on that bottom 10% who are never going to change. I need to focus on that top 10% who love and support me, and in doing so, that remaining 80% might see that what we have to offer is of value and worth and might move up to join that group.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. I know there are people listening right now that are thinking, man, I want to be part of your tribe. I want to be part of your group. I want you to lift me up. I want you to make me better. I want you to encourage me. So can you just tell people how they can connect with you? How can they become part of your tribe? How can they track your journey? How can they connect with you for speaking and sharing and growing? And then ultimately where they can eventually read all of this in print so they can hold on to it and go back and highlight and do all the
Absolutely.
things. Yeah.
So again, also another reason, Bradlee W. Skinner is it's easy to remember, hopefully, and to find.
With
So
the
if you
two E's
search
in
for
Bradley. Yeah.
if you search for at Bradlee W. Skinner, I'm on all social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, even TikTok. You can find me on. You just search at Bradlee W. Skinner. You should be able to find me. Also, you can go to my website, bradleewskinner.com. You can find me anywhere really just by searching that. And yes, I do. Right now, we're doing a lot with virtual speaking engagements since there's a lot of restrictions with COVID. But if there's anything that I can do in helping with professional development, if it's working with students, if it's giving inspirational or insight and thought-provoking speaking for your students, I do that as well. Anything I can do just to help and let people know that being at I guess if you're going to really say it, the good thing about being and hitting rock bottom is that you only got one place to go and it's up. And I've been there. I've experienced my own rock bottom, and it wasn't pleasant, but it made me a better person. It made me more resilient, and it helped me get to a point where I am today that I can offer and let people know that there's hope, that there's success out there, that there's still a better future for you. And no matter how you're struggling with whatever mental health aspects that might be, there's always a way out, and you've got to accept that you can talk to somebody. It's not a weakness. It's a strength to recognize your limitations and to find help and to let good people around you help make you better. And it's okay. And I'm grateful in recognizing that I have and I still have those weaknesses, but I've got good people who love me and they care about me and they want to see me get better and to be better to help other people. And that's so important in my life right now. And hopefully I can help others recognize the value of that as well.
I appreciate that on so many levels. Um, Personally, uh, that is encouraging. It's an amazing reminder. It's helpful to realize I'm not alone. I know there are other people listening to this too, saying, "Oh, it's not that misery loves company, but sometimes it's community that we crave, and we
Mm-hmm.
crave not feeling like the outsider, the one on an island by
Yep.
ourselves." So I appreciate that you gave your contact so that people can reach out to you if they're just looking for that next step or that validation that here's what you can do to get the help and support that you need. I know you are available for that, and I appreciate that. I'm also going to encourage people to grab a hold of your book. It's going to be out very, very soon. As we're recording this, I know it's coming out really soon because you are working with amazing publishers right now that I know are doing all they can to get that sucker out there because teachers desperately need this. So I'm assuming on
Yep.
social
Shout
media
out
you'll be,
to Code Breakers.
yeah,
They're working with Brian and Daphne over at Code Breakers. Has been amazing. It's been a great opportunity for me because at first when I kind of pitched the idea, um, I still I still struggle with a lot of self doubt.
mhm,
That's something that's just no matter how confident and how much bravado I can put out there, I still have issues of my own, and one of those is I still struggle a lot with self doubt. And so when Darren actually said, "Hey, you should kind of pitch your book idea to him," and I was like, "Why would someone want to read this?" This was my first thought. But then I realized sometimes it's not about me. It's about those other educators out there, those other school leaders who can keep great educators from leaving. It's about having those opportunities of recognizing just how valuable the people in our school buildings are, all professionals within our school buildings, and we don't want any of them to leave unless it's by their own choice because they've got something even greater in the future for them. But we certainly never want to feel like we're pushing somebody out because we need them there. We need
yeah.
to love them. We need to care. We need to treat them like professionals. And so if my book in any way can help keep good people helping good kids, that's what we need.
And you talk about surrounding yourself with people that want to see you succeed. And Brian and Daphne are there. They are
Hmm.
absolutely incredible, incredible people. So, yeah, good publishing company, good group to work with, but more importantly, good people. And you
Yeah.
you chose very well. So Bradley, I appreciate you taking time out of your crazy busy schedule to be so transparent, so real. I know we joked about your nickname at the beginning, Phony Stark, but there was nothing phony about this whatsoever. I mean, your transparency, your realness, your humility, and just your willingness to carve out time to help make other people better. It speaks to who you are. Personally, I appreciate it, and I know the listeners are so appreciative of this as well. So if you're listening right now, go connect with this man. Follow his journey. You will be inspired. You'll be uplifted. You will be empowered. Just remember that you truly can change kids' lives, and you can change your life as well. He's a living testament to that. So Bradley, I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity.